My name is Yoram Cohen. I'm the director of the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies. And welcome, everyone. If it's your first time at UCLA, double welcome. This has been my home for about 37 years. So always I discover new things, new ideas, great academicians, writers, poets, musicians, technologists that contribute so much to our community, to the world. And today, it's my pleasure to welcome you to a very special program. We have a program with an Israeli author, Ayelet Gundar-Goshen, who will speak to us about her latest award-winning novel, Waking Lions. We are thrilled that she is here at UCLA, and this is her one stop in Los Angeles, so we're fortunate. I also like to thank our partners in this event, the Writer's Block Presents and its founder, curator, Andrea Grossman. Thank you. For all of her assistance and dedication in sharing contemporary literature with a wider audience. I also like to acknowledge our UCLA co-sponsors, the Department of Comparative Literature, the Department of Near Eastern Languages and Culture, and the Center for Near Eastern Studies. Our moderator this evening is David Kippen, and go ahead. Stand up so they can see you. So please welcome, join me in welcoming David. Now, David is the former literature director of the National Endowment for the Arts. Born and raised in Los Angeles, he opened the Boyle Heights bookstore and lending library, Libros Schmebros, in 2010. And he's the former book editor and critic of the San Francisco Chronicle and contributor to multiple volumes of California cultural history. He holds a degree in literature from Yale University, teaches undergraduate students, full-time undergraduate students here at UCLA in the UCLA writing program. And Maura, the deputy director of the Nazarian Center for Israel Studies, has added here that most important is that he is a confirmed Leo Baeck Temple, member. So before I'm going to ask David to come up to the podium and introduce Ayelet, I just wanted to make sure that I tell you right now, because I'll probably forget later, that there's going to be a book signing, after this event. So those of you that have a book and would like it to sign, you can do that, and you can also purchase a book, right, and have it signed. So with that, David.
People say nice things and introduce you, and it's always such fun, and then you repay them by correcting something. The only thing I want to correct is that I'm not just a confirmed Leo Baeck, son of Leo Baeck. I was confirmed at Leo Baeck. But other than that, thank you very much for a lovely introduction. And thank you and Andrea and Maura for inviting me to be here, because once in a while, I'm a schmoozer and people invite me to interview people in public, and it's kind of nice. And most of the time, the books are pretty good. Sometimes you have to be polite. And this time, I absolutely adore the book that I've been given to read, and I gather some of you have read it, others of you have bought, or I encourage to grab a copy on your way out, because it's just an honor to have the privilege of interviewing Ayelet, whom I have just met, and about whom I only know this secondhand. And you'll forgive me if I read selectively from her bio. There's a lot more there than there is to me. Yoram had to pad. I'm going to have to trim, but you know, and probably she will edit me as I've just ungratefully edited Yoram, but she is a fascinating woman, not just a tremendously gifted novelist. She was born in Israel in 1982. Her first novel, which you cannot find for love or money, and not that I haven't tried. I mean, yes, I run a nonprofit lending library in Boyle Heights. I am a haunter of bookstores. And I would have to pay more in postage than I usually pay for books to get a copy of it. But I'm going to be intrigued to hear about it. It's called One Night Markovitch. It won a prize. It won several prizes, or what would seem like several prizes, until you see how many more prizes Waking Lions has won. It's been translated into 13 languages. Is more by now? I'm any minute now, I'm sure it'll be translated into another one. There's this little medallion down here in the corner that says 100 Notable Books, New York Times Book Review. They don't give these out like candy. This is very much an acclaimed book on both sides of the Atlantic. As those of you who've read it certainly know, it was a finalist for Jewish Book Club Awards. The interesting, or one of many interesting things about Ayelet, she also... you know a little bit about her well, actually you don't. I'm going to have to tell you. She writes for television. She goes back and forth between television and fiction, which once upon a time might have been unheard of, and now thanks to shows like The Wire you actually hear about, and it's impressive to me that she can succeed in two media like that. She freelances for the BBC's cultural commentary, Financial Times, Time Magazine, The Telegraph. Okay, and here's where it gets doubly interesting. As if writing fiction, writing for television weren't enough, she has a master's degree in psychology from Tel Aviv University, and she studied screenwriting at the Sam Spiegel Film School in Jerusalem, which I love. Sam Spiegel, who produced all the great big epics of David Lean, endowed a film school, and Ayelet is a distinguished graduate of it. She is still a clinical psychologist. She teaches psychology at Tel Aviv University and the Holon Institute of Technology. And how all of this? I am at a loss to understand. She's involved in the Israeli civil rights movement. I feel really lucky to get to ask her about some of this, and then maybe you folks will ask her about some of this. But she's taken a load off my mind by intending to speak for herself for a little bit before I start heckling her. So by all means, come on up and speak for yourself. Ayelet Gundar-Goshen.
Thank you for that. I'll start by introducing the main story of Waking Lions, because I don't know how many of you have read the novel and how many of you haven't, and I'll try to do it interesting to both the people who already read it and to people who know nothing about it. So, Waking Lions begins with a car accident, and the driver is a doctor. He's the Israeli doctor. His name is Eitan Green. And he thinks of himself as a good man, as the good concept of the Israeli man, which means, first, he's a doctor, he saves lives. Second, he's a liberal, he's a left-wing liberal. And, you know, he's a dad, he has 2 kids, he has a wife, he has everything. And then when he drives back home from a long shift in Be'er Sheva hospital, he accidentally hits an Eritrean refugee. And he is afraid for his position in the hospital. He is afraid for the love of his wife, the way his wife looks at him, because she also thinks he's a good man. He's afraid of his children waking up in the morning and not knowing where their daddy is. And he makes a decision. He decides to leave this man there in the side of the road because he's a doctor and he knows that this man is beyond help. He decides to leave this man there in the side of the road and to get into the car and to drive on. And this is based on a real story that I heard about an Israeli guy that was traveling in the Himalaya in India. And this Israeli guy accidentally hit a local beggar. And he was afraid of the prison in India, and he knew that he wants to come home to Israel, to his family. And he made a decision, this Israeli guy. He made a decision to leave this man there. And when he made this decision, what fascinated me when I heard this story, it's a true story, was that he couldn't just leave the man there. So he opened his wallet and he took out the highest bill that he had. It was $100 bill, that's a lot in India. And he left the bill there, the $100 bill, on the body of the local beggar in the Himalaya. And when I heard this story, I was fascinated because I thought about this moment when you open your wallet. I mean, it's like the good part of you knows that what you're doing is wrong. That's the part that opens the wallet. And then there's a part of you that asks, okay, so how many bills am I going to take out right now? And what fascinated me about this story when I heard it was that this guy didn't look like the concept that I had of a bad guy. I mean, when we read about hit and run accidents, we always have this concept in our mind of what kind of person can do such a thing. And this concept, I mean, he looks like the evil guy from I don't know, from Marvel comics or from Disney film, like the ultimate evil. But this guy, he didn't look like the ultimate evil. He looked, you know, he had a book of Garcia Marquez. He had a guitar. He listened to the same music I listened to. He was, in a way, a mirror picture of me. And when I heard this story, I was haunted by it because I thought, am I 100% sure that if I was driving back home late at night and nobody would ever say that, I mean, when I wrote Waking Lions, I was pregnant, and it took longer than the pregnancy because a pregnancy of a novel is much longer than pregnancy of a baby. But I was pregnant during the last phases, and I kept asking myself, I mean, what are the things that people do in order to be able to be there in the morning? Because I think that's the first commandment for a parent. You should be there in the morning. When your kid wakes up and he asks, where are you? You're supposed to be there. And then I thought, could it be that if I was driving back home late at night, that I would be capable of doing such a thing? And then the first answer is, of course, no, because we all like to think good things about ourselves. That's why we like judging the people in the newspaper. Newspaper is about judging people. I think literature is about trying to understand people. So when you read in a newspaper about a guy committing a hit and run, you're just thinking, oh, he's a bad guy. But when you read literature about a guy committing hit and run, you're forced to ask yourself, both as the reader and as the writer, is he a bad guy? And the more difficult question is, am I a bad guy? Am I not as good as I want to be? Am I 100% sure that I would stop? And the second question that haunted me while writing Waking Lions was, does it make a difference, the fact that the guy that he hit was an Indian beggar? Would that Israeli guy in the Himalaya, if he accidentally hit an Israeli girl, if he accidentally hit me, would he be capable of leaving me there? Or is it more easy to leave somebody in the side of the road when he doesn't look like you or like your brothers or like your sisters, when his skin is different, when his language is different? And I know what's the right answer. The right answer is that, of course, not. And I would say that we have hit and run accidents in Israel where Israelis hit other Israelis and leave them there. And I guess it also happens here in the US. But the way I thought about it, there is a chance that this Israeli doctor, that this left-wing liberal Israeli doctor, if he had accidentally hit a girl from the nearby kibbutz, you know kibbutz, right? So then he wouldn't be capable of leaving her there. And that was the starting point of Waking Lions. It's not just a car accident when a man is hitting a person walking, a man in a jeep and a person walking. For me, it was a question of, you have the first world country, okay? Because this white Israeli doctor, middle class doctor, for me, he's the representative of Israel, or as Israel as Israel likes to think of itself, as we Israelis like to think of ourselves. And we're the good guys. I mean, that's how I was brought up. We're the good guys. And then the moment of the accident, it's the moment when you ask yourself, do we really know who we are and what we're capable of? In the private sphere, this specific man, with his whole biography, when he asks himself, what defines me more? Living my entire life as a good guy, helping the old lady in the supermarket with the groceries, going to the Boy Scouts, serving in the army, doing the right thing? Or is what defines me more this one moment of decision? So that's in the private sphere. But then I think about the political sphere, about what's going on today in Israel with the refugees situation. And then you think, well, this guy accidentally really hits an illegal immigrant. But all of us are right now, in a way, are hit and runners. Because the entire Israeli society, as a first world society, is at the moment facing the illegal immigration of people coming from Eritrea and coming from Sudan. And we also face the same question that this doctor is facing. And this question is, what is my moral responsibility towards other people, towards people that don't look like me? But, and that's history's irony, they don't look like me, but they share so much more if you look at the history of the Jewish people. I mean, at us Israelis being a nation of refugees. And then you see, how do we welcome the current refugees that coming to knock on our door? And these are the things that troubled me while I started writing Waking Lions. Because I thought, we have those people coming now from Eritrea and from Sudan. And we know what it means to be refugees. We know what it means to be escaping war and coming knocking on heaven's doors, on the doors of every possible country, asking them to let you in. And we know what it means that countries don't open their gates for you and to be sent back to where you came from. And me, as an Israeli and as a granddaughter of refugees, I think really it's history's irony that now we are the gatekeepers of the promised land. And you have the Eritreans and the Sudanese, which are actually walking the same road that the biblical Israelis walked in the Exodus from Egypt to Israel. We're talking about crossing the desert of Sinai to reach the promised land. And we know this journey. I mean, every Israeli kid, every Jewish kid, we know this journey. This is our collective identity. And now we're facing people walking the same journey, not metaphorically, physically, walking the same journey. And you have the question of, what are we going to do with these people? What is our responsibility as a Jewish nation towards these people? So this was also one of the things that bothered me while I sat down writing Waking Lions. And the last thing I say, and then we'll have a conversation, was that when I started writing about it, I told my partner that this is what I'm going to write. And he said, please, 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 bevakasha, don't write a 400 pages novel of a white guy sitting in his living room feeling really, really guilty. First, because there always is such a novel. It's called Crime and Punishment. Highly recommended, but written already. And the second thing my partner said, he said, if he sits in his living room, then he's still comfortable. And that's something that really haunted me. And my partner, I'm a psychologist, so he said, you have people coming to your clinic every day, telling you things that they feel really guilty about. But people can live very good with guilt. I mean, we're very trained in carrying our guilt with us. You know, it's like a purse, and you take it everywhere. And it can be really heavy and uncomfortable, but you can go your entire life carrying your guilt. So it might won't be a purse, it will be like a huge rucksack. But he said, people come to your clinic every day, they confess their sins, and he doesn't think much of psychologists. So he said, and then you forgive them, or they come out like feeling all good with themselves, like bad but good. And then they go on with their life. They go on with their guilt, and that's too comfortable. And he said, you have to shake his world entirely. And thanks to that conversation came Circuit. Circuit is the wife of the refugee that ate and killed. And Circuit came from this conversation because my partner said, but what if somebody was there? What if somebody was there watching this one moment that you don't want nobody to ever witness? And what if this woman watching the accident, she's the unseen in the Israeli society? Because the Eritreans, refugees in Israel, they're unseen people. It's like there's an invisible wall between us and between them. So I can be like sitting in a restaurant and having a conversation, and one of these refugees would be cleaning my table, and I would be talking with my friend about the most intimate stuff. I wouldn't even lower my voice when this woman takes off the tray, because I don't see her in a way. She's the cleaning lady. And then I thought, what if there's this woman that nobody ever noticed, that nobody ever stopped to look at her? I mean, she works in a restaurant, so she sees thousands of people every day, hundreds of people every day, and nobody looks her in the eyes. And suddenly this unseen woman sees something that changes everything. Because a moment before, she was in the bottom of the Israeli food chain, and the white Israeli doctor was in the top, and then she noticed something that just shifts it entirely. And this Eritrean refugee, suddenly she holds him. She can make him do whatever she wants. And she starts blackmailing him. And it's not just money that she wants. At first he thinks it's money, but she wants something different. She wants him to come to a hospital in a way. She has all those Eritrean refugees who are afraid to come to the hospital because they're afraid of getting arrested, which is, by the way, not accurate, because the healthcare in Israel, you won't get arrested when you go to the hospital, and you will get medical treatment. But people are afraid to come because they're afraid that the police will be waiting at the doorstep when they leave. And then she forces this doctor to come every night to a deserted garage in the middle of the desert and to give medical treatment for these refugees who are afraid to come to the Israeli hospital. So this doctor, he has like a secret life, like, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So in a way, during the day, he's working his regular life, but in the night, he's coming to this deserted garage, blackmailed to take care of all those people that he never even bothered to look at. And so he sees Israel that we don't see. He sees all those people who are in the Israeli desert. If you open in Google Maps a map of the Israeli desert, then you see Beersheva, Eilat, and some kibbutz, and that's it. You don't see anything. So you think it's empty. But it's not empty. It's full of people. So you have the Eritreans, and you have the Sudanese, and you have the Bedouins, the unrecognized village in the Negev. And all these people, you don't see them in Google Maps, but they're there. And that's the first time that this Israeli doctor is forced to really open his eyes and look at the society that he is living in. And for me, this meeting of Eitan and Sirkit was the reason to write Waking Lions. I mean, this first I think they hate each other, but after a while comes this sort of attraction. But it's not just a sexual attraction, it's the attraction that you have to somebody who really knows you. Because this Eritrean refugee that blackmails the doctor, she is his worst enemy because she forces him, but she's also the only person in the world that really knows him for who he really is. His wife doesn't know who he really is. Maybe she doesn't want to know. And his friend doesn't know. They all have this image of him. And she's the only person in the world that knows him entirely. And I think there is something very erotic with somebody else that knows your deepest secret. It's intimidating, but it's also appealing, I think, in the same time.
Your partner may not know much about psychology, but he sounds like a very good editor. I'm curious, why is the book called Waking Lions?
I like the idea of like a hidden predator. Do you hear me? It's okay? ככה? להוציא אותו? להוציא אותו.
Am I okay?
I like the idea of a hidden predator because I think in Israelis we never think of ourselves as lions. We think of ourselves as victims, as victims of history, which for many years was the truth, and as victims of politics. And we don't think of ourselves as the predator. We think of ourselves as the victim. And this doctor, he doesn't think of himself as a privileged white man. He doesn't like this rhetoric. But when the car accident occurs, he suddenly is faced with his power. And the truth is that he can do such a thing and get away with it. And I think that's one lion being awakened. And the second, I thought about this woman, this Eritrean woman. I mean, a woman that moves from having nothing to having all this power. And I had this question, just the question that I have about the Israeli society, the question of, after being a victim for so long, when you suddenly gain power, what will you do? Will you, Amos Oz writes about it. He says, after the Holocaust, you have two completely different lessons, the universal and the particular. And Amos Oz says, after being a victim, you always have like two different lessons. One is to say, never again, I will be stronger than everybody and aggressive than everybody to protect myself. This is the particular lesson. And the universal lesson would be, I know what it means to be a victim. So I will never victimize somebody else. So I was curious about this woman. Like, will the lion be awakened inside of her, or will she fight it?
What's the title in Hebrew?
להאיר אריות.
And it's a literal translation? Well, now, exactly is an interesting word in this context. I mean, I'm assuming you're bilingual, or no?
I don't read literature in English except for Harry Potter.
Except for what?
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter. Okay.
You say Harry, not Harry?
Harry, yeah. So have you not read this in English?
I can't. My English I can speak, but I can't appreciate. I even insulted her a little bit because she sent me the translation.
Yeah.
She's an amazing woman. We worked together on the first novel, and she asked me what I thought, and I told her, I don't know, which I now understand. You don't say it to somebody because it's... but I can't tell because my English is not good enough to appreciate. That's why I don't read literature in English.
Yeah.
I can't hear the music. And I don't know if it's because there is no music or because I can't hear the music because it's not my language.
There's music.
I'll tell her.
Please do. So much of this story, though mercifully your partner is right, not all of it, but certainly the main character, if there is a main character, or one of the two main characters, is a man, and a very fully imagined, convincing, at times almost alarmingly believable man, at least for a male reader. You're a psychologist, but you are not a man. How did you go about getting inside the consciousness of somebody of, I guess you can't say the other anymore, another gender?
It's really interesting that you're asking this, because I just came back. I had a talk in Carleton College in Minnesota. Ooh. And one of the students there told me that she felt offended by how he looks at women and how objectifying he is in his looking at women.
Totally unrealistic. Men would never do that.
And I told her, but if he wouldn't be objectifying women, he wouldn't be an Israeli man. I mean, and I just thought, I mean, I'm a woman, and of course I don't want any chauvinism or objectifying in my working, but I think when you write literature, it's really dangerous to ask literature to like be the soap in which you do like this, you know, to try to clean people from their thoughts and from their inner sexism or their inner racism. Or, I mean, I think when you write a novel, you have to write people as they are, not as they should be. And so when I wrote Eitan, yeah, he looks at women in a very sexist way, but I think if he wouldn't, then really he wouldn't be an Israeli man. And I think he's also, and I think he's also a racist, or a latent. You say latent, latenti?
Latin?
Latenti?
Oh, latent. What?
Okay.
Yeah.
Like latent racist, one that doesn't think of himself as a okay. And
none of them do.
None of us do.
None of us do, yes.
And this was also something that I was worried about, because I thought he is being a racist again and again in this novel in a very delicate, I hope it's delicate, way. And then I thought, I don't want people to read it and to think that I agree with this as a person or as a writer, but I wanted to reveal the inner racist that each one of us has inside. And that's one of my problems with the politically correct, that if you don't write about it, it's not like it's going away. It's there. You have to write about it. You have to write about it because this is who we are. And I think one of the hubris, like one of his sins, is that he doesn't recognize himself as being a racist. And I think we do it again and again. I mean, I think of myself as a Jewish woman, so I'm thinking I can't be a racist because I'm Jewish, I know what it means, and I'm a woman. And of course I can be a racist, and I can be chauvinist because I grew up in a chauvinist society. This is I mean, you live your entire life in a society. You are a mirror of the society, whether you like it or not.
I agree with you about people who want, every character in a novel to be perfect. The only thing more boring I can think of than a novel in which every character is perfect is a thriller in which every character is perfect. How would that be possible? To what extent do you think of this book as a thriller? Because it's a terrific thriller. A thriller, a suspense novel like James M. Cain or someone like that.
I really like the mechanism of a thriller. Like I call myself plot junkie, because when I read stories, I really need a strong plot. And when I wrote Waking Lions, and I thought about the wife of the doctor, the wife of the Israeli doctor, she's a police detective. And you want to guess what she's investigating? And this is a cheap, you say, cheap. Yeah. It's a cheap trick, right? It's a beginner trick for literature to write the female, like the woman of the man committing the crime is the woman detecting the crime. But what I thought about it, and that's why I like thrillers, is that in the deeper level, this is not just about creating a plot that would be, I hope, suspenseful, you say?
Yeah.
This is about what does it mean to be a detective. It means to try to know the truth. And my question was, does this woman really wants to know the truth about her husband? Do people really want to know the truth about the people they love? Because I think there's a reason why people make love in the dark. And the reason is that in order to really love somebody, you don't want to see everything all the time. And I'm a mother now, and I think that to fully love my daughter with all my heart, there is a bit of chosen blindness in our relationship.
On both sides.
On both sides. I choose to be blind to certain elements in her, because for me, she's the most beautiful girl in the world. And if I show you a picture, I don't know what you'll say, but you won't think that she's the most beautiful girl in the world. And it's okay. It's not your job to think so. It's my job. But I really, like, there's things that I don't want to see about her or about my partner or about my parents in order to keep loving them the way I do. So for me, his wife being a police detective wasn't only this mechanism of making it a thriller, because we don't know if she's going to catch him or if she's not going to catch him. So this is about the plot. But in the more deeper level, in the psychological level, I was interested in, does she really want to catch him? I mean, does she really want to know what her partner is capable of? And there's this place in the book when she talks about it, that when she comes back home, she's a police officer, detective, so she takes off the gun because you don't enter your house with a gun. And she takes off the uniform because you don't meet your kids and your partner wearing a uniform. And she also takes off this penetrative look, you know, the detective look, because you don't meet your family with a detective look. So I'm very busy with the question of how much truth can one relationship bear and remain, you know, strong.
What does your partner think of the book?
He liked it, but he actually, the first thing he said when he read the manuscript was, "It's good, but it's not like the first one." What? Yeah.
Show him that. What was the first one about? Was the first one a thriller?
No, it was completely different. It was completely different. It was comic.
Really?
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. I'm sorry, you got the wrong one.
Oh no, this is, believe you me, this is probably, I love thrillers and crime novels and comic novels. I mean, there's not a lot I dislike. I'm curious, as long as it's good writing, which this so is. I marvel not just from a time management standpoint at all the many things you do, writing novels and being a psychologist and writing for television. Are those thrillers as well, the television work? Are those genre dramas or not necessarily?
No, it's a TV right now screened in Israel about Orthodox teens, Orthodox Jewish teens that choose to recruit the army. So it's actually, it's a drama.
And so how do these different professions, these different callings, feed each other or work against each other? Does what you've learned about human nature as a psychologist inform the way you write? Does what you've learned about story as a writer for television inform the way you construct a plot? How do you separate or not separate or allow your different professions to interpenetrate each other?
I feel both psychology and writing are always driven from the same question, which is why do people do what they do? And I think they both share the idea that you can't judge your patient or your characters. You should try to understand them. So if I read in the newspaper about a guy doing a hit and run, I think, he's a bad guy. But if this guy would come to the clinic, then, I mean, if somebody comes to the clinic and says, I'm beating my child, then of course the first thing I want to say is, you're a bad person, go away, I'm calling the cops. But this way you won't help him and you won't help the child. So as a psychologist, the first thing you do is you say, okay, just a second was judging. What happened here? There's a beautiful sentence in Hebrew of Yehuda Amichai, I'll say it in Hebrew. הוא אומר, גם האגרוף היה פעם כף יד פתוחה ואצבעות. In English it means even the fist was once an open hand with fingers. And I think that's the most humanistic sentence. That's one of the most beautiful sentences in Hebrew poetry, because he says whenever you see a hand like this and you automatically raise your hand like this, he says, it used to be like this. What happened? And I think about, when my daughter and then my son were born, their hands, they weren't like this, they were like that. And then you think, so everybody's hands are like that when they're born. And then you think, what happened? And I feel both literature and psychology are like this endless journey of asking. You see a fist and you ask, but it used to be like this, so what happened? And you ask it I asked it with Eitan in Waking Lions. And I ask it whenever I meet a patient that tells me something terrible, I ask, okay, so it used to be an open hand. What happened?
You make me want to go back and reread immediately the part where an infant is born and you pay particular attention to the child's hands. And then there's another character who is a more traditional villain. He's a creep, he's a racist, and there's a digression in the book where you ask yourself, at what point did he become an evil man? Our assumption would be that, his parents beat him, and you leave it open just at what point that happened, or you sort of question the idea that there was one moment where he became an evil man. You, as a psychologist, and I suppose as a novelist, may have thought about the idea of evil and whether any people are just born bad and the planet would be better off without them. Do you think there's such a thing as evil?
I'm thinking about Hannah Arendt's conception of the banality of evil. And I think we always like in cinema and in TV and in fiction those characteristics of psychopath. They always enchant us. But I think most of the evil things are not done by those exotic psychopaths. They are done by regular people. And I think you have more harm done by moral indifference than by actual intention. So for me, it's coming again and again to the geology of indifference. And also I think about Circuit, about this Eritrean refugee, because there's a point in the novel, I'm going to ruin a bit for those of you who haven't read yet, but there's a point in the novel when Eitan, the doctor, at first he and the reader thinks that she's forcing him, blackmailing him to give medical treatment to the Eritrean community just out of the goodness of her heart. And then he finds out that she's taking money for it. And he's so angry at her. And he feels so misled, do you say? Like deceived?
Yes.
And then she tells him something like, how dare you judge me? How dare you expect me to be better than you? Because in Israel, this discussion about refugees, it's always, you have the right-wing people saying that they are the ultimate evil, and you have left-wing liberals saying that they are the ultimate victims. And none of these are really victims or evil are not words to describe a person. I mean, not a real person. And at first, when I started writing her, I thought she should be good, like a noble woman, like this Maria in a way, or like Maria, Christianity, Madonna, Mary
from the Bible, yeah.
Tell me the difference afterwards. Okay, and like, you know, like, or like a Moses in a way, caring for her people. And then I thought, this is in a way dehumanizing her, because if you take the evil out of a character, it's not a person anymore. It's a poster.
I'm curious about your background. You mentioned your family, I think 2 generations ago, coming to Israel. Where did they come from?
All over the place. My grandfather, he's 93 tomorrow.
Huh.
Okay, so
Today,
good thing that we're talking about it. It means that I'm going to call home. My grandfather lived in Poland. Then the Russians came. They kicked him to Siberia. Then the Nazis came, killed everybody who wasn't kicked out to Siberia. Then he came out of Siberia, and then he walked half of Europe trying to get to Israel. I have another part from Romania that fled just before the war, the part from Austria that fled just before the war. But you always have those people who didn't. I think when you talk to Israelis or to Jewish people, they always have this story about how somebody went somewhere and because of that he was saved. Like somebody took the wrong turn, which happened to be the right turn. And then I think always if you go 2 generations or 3 generations backwards, you have a disaster.
How long have you been? Do you come to America periodically? Is this among your first visits to the country?
I came a month ago. I'm doing it's called a Writers in Residence in San Francisco. And I'm doing now tours with Waking Lions, but this is my first visit to America as a grown-up.
What about Israel don't Americans get?
Wow, that's a big question. Americans or American Jews? I think it's a different question. I said I think there's a difference between how Americans see Israel and American Jews see Israel. I think there's a big difference.
Whichever one interests you more.
I'm really interested now in the relationship between Israelis and American Jews, because I came to San Francisco, to the Bay Area, and you have many Israelis relocating now. And all of them told me that they can't make American friends. They can't really have intimacy with Americans. And it was very interesting for me because I grew up on American culture. I mean, we see American TV and cinema, and they told me that you can have a really nice conversation, but you can never get intimate. And I'm really troubled. Like, I'm walking here for a month, and I'm wondering if it's really true, and if so, then why? I mean, the cultural differences are. So
is the idea that American Jews can't get close to Israeli Jews, or vice versa, or both?
I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about it, because they said there is like, you have a lot of joy in the meeting because both sides are really happy to meet each other. But the Israeli friends of mine told me that they can't really get intimate. I don't know yet what it means, but they said that there is something there that we can't go like a barrier that they can't cross. And I'm really curious about it. I'm here for 4 months, and one of my missions is because I just read Jonathan Safran's Foyer. Did you read his new novel? And he describes the Israeli cousins coming for a visit. Did you get to read it?
Not yet.
He describes the Israeli cousins coming for a visit. And the way he pictured it, it was so funny, because he writes about him being an American Jew feeling inferior to the Israelis coming. And I thought that my experience growing up in Israel was that we always looked like this at our American cousins coming for a visit, because America was the empire, and we always felt like they came dressed with clothes that we never understood. And we knew nothing about it. We came to Israel a year later. So we would sit and just look at how they're clothed. And I thought, it's really interesting that you have everybody who really want to meet each other and to know each other, and you have this wall between people. I find fascinating.
And are you here on a writing fellowship? Is the idea that you're going to have time away from work and just write a lot? Or is it a cultural exchange of some kind?
I'm teaching a course about contemporary Israeli culture in San Francisco State University. So I'm meeting a lot with students, and it's really interesting to see how Israeli culture is perceived through the eyes of people who know nothing about Israel, and that's the first time. That's the first time they hear about Israel, and it's just fascinating to see how they look at us.
How do they look at you? What do they say?
When I screened the first TV episode, the first chapter of the TV series that we wrote about the Orthodox teen recruiting the army, and after 20 minutes, one of the students raised her hand and she said, "What's this hat that they have there? Is it something in the army?"
I think the misunderstandings may go even deeper. But who did you read growing up?
Grossman, Amos Oz, the Trinidad, Grossman, Amos Oz, Yoshua.
And it sounds like Dostoevsky.
נכון. My grandmother taught Bible.
Oh.
So she would talk a lot about the Bible. And I grew up with these people. I mean, there was always this fight about Shaul versus David. Shaul, you say Saul? How do you say it in English? So they could fight about it over dinner. Like, who's more tragic, Saul or David? So it wasn't like people in a book. It was like people that you can choose sides. Who are you in favor with? So it was a lot of Bible also, but secular Bible.
When did you first discover crime fiction?
I'm not sure.
Or what have you come to when you sit down to put together a plot and tell a story with momentum? What do you think of?
I think about כישרון של מה Ripley.
Oh yeah, Patricia Highsmith.
That's how you pronounce it.
Yes.
Thank you. So I really like that because there was something hypnotic about the way she builds a story. And Ian McEwan, how do you say?
Ian McEwan.
McEwan, he also wrote one of his, it's called Enduring Love.
Yeah.
Which has a strong element of suspense in it. And I love the way he's building it. So it's both psychological, but it's also very, like, it gets you.
Yeah. Well, you've come to the capital of American crime fiction. So on behalf of my fellow Californians, welcome. You read any Raymond Chandler yet?
Raymond Chandler, oh. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, then. You're...
And film noir.
Film noir?
Film noir, how do you say it? Film noir, yeah.
Oh, film noir, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Noir is not noir, it's a different one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not just in terms of the story and the plot. I mean, I feel a lot of influence, the line by line, the similes come fast and furious the way they would in a Chandler novel. And James M. Cain, I couldn't get out of my mind. Wonderful Californian writers that you remind me of, and I can't think of higher praise. I'm curious. So, do you intend to persevere in the genre? Or will the next one be as different from this as this is from the last one?
My third novel was just published in Israel, and it's completely different.
Congratulations.
Toda.
So what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be over there, ministering to it, bringing it into the world?
I was on a tour. It was also published now in German, so I was on a tour with it in Germany now. It's about a girl that makes up a story about a sexual assault that didn't happen. And it changes her life completely. It turns her into a Cinderella.
That kid from Carleton College who didn't like your flawed character.
Not going to like this one as well.
I don't think she's going to like this one very much.
I lost that one, definitely. But what I like about the thriller genre, I think if you go back to Greek tragedy, it's always about the question of knowing, right? I mean, all the detectives ones, it's always about this quest for knowledge. And you always seek knowledge outside. Like Oedipus? You say Oedipus, right?
Yes, you do.
Okay. Oedipus, he just wants to find out who the killer is. And he doesn't understand what when you try to find the outside evil, you have to face your inner evil, that the killer is not some outside villain. It's always about you, eventually. So I think when you come to thrillers, you're always looking for outside evil, like the outside psychopath or the outside murderer. But in the same time, it's always this quest to finding the knowledge, like self-knowledge. And self-knowledge, not the things that we don't like to know about ourselves. I think this is what detectives are out for. And I think that's what literature is out for. It's those things that we don't want to know about ourselves. And then we open a novel and we read about somebody else, and if it's happening to him, then we can bear it.
Is there the kind of rigid segregation in Israel between crime novels and literary novels, or is there a little more back and forth than we put up with here?
I don't think we have enough crime novels to even call it a genre.
Really?
I think so. I mean, we have Dror Mishani, really good.
Yeah?
Harper Collins, really good. He also translated to English. We have Dror Mishani. We had Batya Gur. And I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's about it. So I think so. So we don't have it as rigid because it's not just as a genre. We do have, I think, this concept of high literature. You call it high versus low?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Which is this?
And I really disagree with this.
Good.
But I mean, I just think a good story is a good story. You see it with kids automatically. I mean, trying to understand a 3.5-year-old, she wouldn't sit there and nod for a second. She wouldn't be smiling and then like peeping into her cell phone with nobody noticing, like my students. She would just stand up and walk. I know when a story is good the second I'm telling it to her. And I think that we're like these kids. I mean, we know when it's good or not. And it's not about genre. It's about, does it touches, the basic questions of what it means to be human or not.
I run this lending library, this nonprofit across town in a working class neighborhood. And I used to be a book critic, so people tend to ask me about, the fate of literature, the future of reading, or things like that. And people, at least in America, like to wring their hands about these things. And I teach at UCLA, so sometimes I wring my hands too. Crosstown, I don't. You spend 5 minutes in Boyle Heights and you'll never worry about the future of literature again. But I'm curious. Are Israeli Jews still the people of the book?
We buy them. I'm not sure if we read them. I mean, you have 4 for 100, arba b'mea. You can buy 4 books for 100 shekel, which is, that's really cheap. Yeah. So you have people buying 4 books for 100 shekels. But I think when you buy 4 books, you don't read them. I think maybe if you just buy one, and then you cherish it more, and you can buy the other 3, but not, not like when you go and you buy a 1+1 free Ben and Jerry's. I don't think it should work this way. But our Minister of Education, Naftali Bennett, banned Dorit Rabinyan's novel. There was a novel last year about a love affair between an Israeli girl and a Palestinian man, which Naftali Bennett, the right-wing minister, he banned it from the school's curriculum. Welcome to Israel. And I heard something really nice about it, that one Israeli editor, when she commented about it, she said, you know what? I think it's really optimistic, because this means that Naftali Bennett really thinks that a book can change the world. Yeah. So as long as we ban books, I guess it means that we really think that literature can change the world.